Hey, good morning everyone. Can you confirm audible or not? So the last session what we discussed, how to handle the exception using try and catch, right? Last time we discussed about this one or not? Okay, let me open our workspace folder. The last example, if you see, you have two statements. After that, in the try block, it raises an exception. In the except block, again raise an exception. In the except block also, you can try expect or not. Yes or no. Wherever the exception raised, that particular state, wherever it may be, that particular statement you can enclose with try. Whenever you use try, that should follow either accept, come on, either accept, another one is what? Or finally or not. Okay. So, can you tell me, try block, all the statements get execute always, valid or invalid? In the try block, one of whatever the statements, okay, how many statements are there? All these statements will get execute always. Valid statement or
No,
invalid statement? It is like invalid.
invalid.
It is like invalid. When all the statements in the try block will execute? When the exception not raised. In the try block, if the exception not raised, it is going to execute all the statements or not. When it is going to terminate a try block execution? Whenever the exception raised. Whenever the exception raised. Yes or no? Whenever the exception raised, okay, the try block terminated the execution and looking for either expect or finally block. Okay, done. Now, expect block always will execute, valid or invalid. Expect block always will execute, valid or invalid. Expect block always will execute. Come on, valid or invalid. Hmm? Invalid, right? Expect block when it is going to execute, whenever the exception raised. For example, in this case only exception raised, that there is an expect block executed. If the exception not raised, for example, LOC equals to Mumbai. If I write like this, exception raised in the try block or not raised? Not raised. Whenever the exception not raised, that corresponding expect block will execute or not execute? Not execute, right? Now, can you save this? Can you save it? Now, can you run this? Now, see, one to Mumbai, exception not raised. Whenever exception not raised, the corresponding expect block will not execute. In expect block, multiple statements are there. How many statements it is not a matter. It is not initiate the execution. And then 2055, 4, 5 executed or not. So, I'm not sure all the statements inside the try block will execute. I'm not sure all the statements inside the expect block also will execute or not. Okay, but one thing, try block initiate the execution or not. But expect block, it is not entered into the execution control, is not entered into the expect block also. When if try block not having the exception, but try block always initiate the execution. Okay, in the try block, first statement always is going to execute. Okay, and the next one is like, okay, quick introduction about the finally block, we'll see. Okay, now see, I have a print one and a print two, and if I write like print 10 by 0 and then print 3 and print 4, it is like a normal termination or abnormal termination? It is, if I run this one, it is like the program terminated as like normal or abnormal. The program terminated as like normal or abnormal. Hmm. The program terminated like abnormal. Why? Because 1, 2 printed. After that, here exception raised. Exception whenever it is raised. If you not handle that exception, if you not handle that exception, it is going to terminate. It is going to terminate your execution from there itself or not. It is going to terminate the execution from there itself. Yes or no? Now, if you come here, py11.py, now it is not saved. Now let me save it. py11.py. Now if you observe here, 1 to executed. Okay, and then print 10 by 0. So here it gives me an error. Exception thrown. The exception message is what? Division by 0. This zero division error. Okay, what is this zero division error? We'll discuss. Zero division error we'll discuss like this. Multiple error messages, value error is there, name error is there, like that, right? We'll discuss that one. Now I don't want to terminate it like abnormal. I want to provide some solution for this. Then I want to provide some solution for this. Come on, I want to terminate the program as like normal. That means I want to give that graceful termination to your program. Then how you can write like try? Yes, no. Okay. Inside this block, okay, I want to write some statement. Which statements followed the indentation? Those statements should inside where? Should inside the block. Now, can anyone tell me if I run this one, what exactly error you can get it? Now, my try only you return. It is not follow either expect or finally. So you can see the syntax error or not. I already told you syntax error when you can get it if you not follow the rules and guidelines of that particular programming language, then you can get the syntax error. Whenever you get the syntax error, okay, there is no logics, nothing. You should have to follow the what? Rules. So expect and finally block. So that if I follow, if I write something like this, okay, print expect. Okay. Now syntactically it is like valid. Now if I run this one, now see this 1, 2 expect block and 3, 4. So my program terminated like abnormal or normal. My program is terminated like abnormal or normal. The program terminated as like abnormal or normal termination. It is like graceful termination only or not. Now I have one more question. Say this. Here I have print location. Okay, here I have print location. After this, I have again print location is there. After that, again I have print location is there. Print 5 is there. Can anyone tell me, okay, what exactly the output is? My program is like terminated as like abnormal or normal? Come on. Is my program terminated as like abnormal or normal? Is my program terminated as like abnormal or normal? Anyone? Okay, so my program terminated like abnormal. Why? Because if you observe, you written try catch, that's okay. But the try expect, I mean, the try and expect handle the exception raised at line number 4. Okay, so 1 to line number 4, okay, exception raised, the corresponding expect block executed. The corresponding expect block executed. Now, if you observe this one, okay, this expect after there has some statements over there, so that it is going to continue the execution of the statements or not. So print 3 also executed. Once it is done, now line number 8, print to location. This location is there or not there? This location, print location, this location is there or not there? Location is not there. Okay, so that again you can get the name error, name location is not defined. You can get the name error. Name location is not defined. Yes or no? It's like a name error. Name location is not defined. Okay, so that print location again throws an error. So what you have to do again, you have to write try and expect block. You have to write it. Now this one, okay, no problem. But again, there has LOC is there. Again, there is LOC. Like this LOC 10 places are there. You want me to write try and expect 10 places? No, it is not a recommended one. See, whenever you face a problem, okay, you handle that problem. That's okay. But in future, if you get the same problem, again, you should not handle, right? You have to give the permanent solution for that particular problem or not. Here, what was the problem? Location is not there. Here the problem is what? Location is not there. If location is not there, okay, it throws an exception, right? So what is the solution for this? At least you have to create the location with some empty data or not. Whenever you put something like this, okay, whenever you put something like this, now see the execution 1 2, okay, except block executed, and then 3, the location is like an empty, and then print, okay, if you want, okay, location without any data, you can put like none also, without put any data, to avoid that error. Okay, you can put like none also. Now you can see the location none, none, 3 4 5 executed. See, in this case what you are trying to understand is, whenever the exception raised, you handle that exception. At the same time, not only handle that exception, you have to provide some alternate solution for that particular problem or not. You have to provide some alternate solution for that particular problem or not. Agreed with me? You have to provide some alternate solution for that particular problem. Agreed with me? Okay, if you provide some alternate solution for that particular problem, the same problem, if anywhere occurred, okay, already the solution provided, the solution used here or not. So I can say exception handling is nothing but just not only handle the exception, you need to provide some solution for that particular problem or not. You need to provide a permanent solution for that particular problem or not. Agreed with me, all? Or come on, you need to provide some solution. Okay, okay, then now let's go with the finally. Now if you come here, instead of this, if I write like a finally, okay, now let's remove this one. Okay, I want to remove this one also. Now what exactly the I mean output. What exactly the output? What exactly the output? What exactly the output was? You know?
1, 2 error and finally broken.
Yeah, 1 2. Next.
Error will get try block are not held. Finally it will print. It will not print 3, 4, 5.
Okay, that means it's like abnormal termination or normal termination.
It is abnormal.
It's like a abnormal termination. You're right. Whenever, okay, you execute these statements, if 1 2 executed and print LOC. Now line number 4, the statement raises what? The statement raises an exception. Whenever you raise an exception, okay, finally block is not the person to handle the exception. That's the reason here, if you observe, exception raised, but the accept block is not there, expect block is not there to handle that exception or not. So exception raised, it is not handled. That is one thing. Okay, next, see, exception raised or not raised, whatever it is, this particular block is going to execute. We'll see one more example. So whenever you return like a try with the finally is a valid combination, but whenever exception raised, it is looking for which? Okay, which block? It is looking for which block? Expect block. But that expect block is not there. That's the reason the exception LOC is not defined and my program terminated abnormal or not. It is syntactically valid, but the exception raised you not handled or not. Yes or no? Okay, now the finally block executed or not? Say this, the finally executed. That means exception at the time of raising an exception, my finally block executed. Now, if I write LOC equals to, if I write LOC equals to, LOC equals to something like this. If I run it, if I run it, now see 1, 2, finally, and 3, 4, 5. That means what? At this moment, my try block raises an exception or not raised. My try block raises an exception or not raised at this moment. Try block raises an exception or not raised.
It will not raise.
If not raised. Whenever the exception raised, finally block executed. If the exception not raised also, my finally block executed or not. That means you can give one statement about the finally. If the exception raised, if the exception not raised, always the finally block is going to execute or not. Okay, whenever exception raised in the try block, it is looking for which block to handle it. To handle that exception, it is looking for which block? To handle that exception, it is always looking for which block? It is always looking for expect block or not. If the expect block is not there, then the time it is directly throw an exception and looking for finally. If the exception raised, exception not raised, always finally block will execute. After executing the finally, it is terminate the program like abnormal or not. But in this case, exception there or not there? Not there. Whenever exception not raised, then the time there is no need of expect block. So it is not looking for the expect block. It is not looking, it is not there. That's okay. Now, exception raised or exception not raised, always which block is going to execute? Finally, so that my finally block is going to execute or not. Agreed? Come on. Okay, what is finally block? Okay, finally is like one block. It is always execute when? It is always execute when? If exception raised, if the exception not raised. Okay, exception raised or exception not raised, always that particular block is going to execute or not. Agreed? Okay, about finally what kind of operations you are going to perform. Okay, there has some operations. Exception raised, I want to execute block of statements. Exception not raised, I want to execute some block of statements. Either exception raised or exception not raised, some of the statements, set of statements. Okay, some of the statements has to execute. That kind of statements can write inside the finally block. Either exception raised or exception not raised, some of the statements I want to execute. In that case, can you write those statements inside the finally block? Can you write those statements inside the finally block? Yes or no? Agreed? Okay? Okay then. Now the next one is now I'm going to write like, okay, this one I'm going to delete it. Here, can I write like this? Valid or invalid? Valid or invalid? Syntactically, it is valid or invalid? Py 13.py. Syntactically valid or invalid? It is like invalid syntax. Okay, so the combination is like try finally expect is like a invalid combination or not. So tell me some combinations. Tell me some combinations. Only try, valid or invalid? Invalid. Try with finally, valid or invalid? Valid. Combination, that means syntax. I'm talking about syntax. Try with expect, Valid or invalid? Valid. Try, finally, and expect. Valid or invalid? Try, finally, and expect. Valid or invalid? Okay, invalid. Try, expect, and finally. Valid or invalid? It is like what? Valid or not? So this is syntactically invalid. If I write something like this, if I write something like this, it is like valid or invalid? This combination is like valid or invalid? It is like 100% valid. At the same time, my program terminated like what? Normal or abnormal? My program terminated like what? Normal or abnormal? As like normal. See, want to execute it in the try block, exception raised. Whenever exception raised, to handle that exception, it is looking for which block? Expect block. Yes, expect block is there, so that the expect printed. Okay, either exception raised or not raised. Okay, if you have the finally block, that finally block is going to execute. So my finally printed. After that, as usual, 3, 4, 5 printed or not. So my program terminated like normal. Understood? This is like a valid combination, right? Now, which exception raised? Which exception raised? Which exception raised? Come on. What is my exception? What is my exception message? As a user, okay, I'm the user. If you see this statement, do you know what exactly the issue was? If you see this output, do you know what exactly the issue was? Do you know this? No, right? Okay, here nothing is there. 1, 2 is there, expect is there, final is there, 3, 4, 5. What I can understand? Expect means accept block executed. I can understand like that. But what exactly the issue was? I'm not right. So my question is, my program should terminate it like normal only, graceful termination only. At the same time, for developer purpose, which exception raised? That exception information I want to see here. My program should terminate normal. Which exception raised? That exception information I want. For example, if I remove this one, exception information I can see. Exception information I can see, but my program terminated like abnormal. I don't want abnormal termination. Normal termination all I want. At the same time, I want to see the exception message. I want to see the exception message. So on how we can get it, how we can see. For that purpose, okay, for that purpose, you can go like this. You can go like this. Now you can get the error. This particular one is not there. Not there. Okay. Now I want to create a variable kind of. What do you know? Which exception raised? Which exception raised? Come on. Which exception raised? As a developer, okay, if you see this one, what is my exception? Name location is not defined, but you can focus on this one now. Okay, this one is like name error, zero division error, value error, like this different errors are there. Okay, error means exceptions are there. Runtime error is nothing but exception, right? This one is like what you know. Whenever you are looking for one member, if that member is not available, then you can get this kind of error. That error name is what? Name error. This is the class, you can say. This is one of the Python predefined class. So now in the expect block, if you want that specific exception message, if you want which exception raised, that exception you can add it. Which exception raised, that particular exception, okay, you can add it. You can give some reference, some alias name you can give it. So how we can give the alias name for this particular one? How we can give the alias name? Okay, you can go with the yes. You can go with the yes. Yes is a keyword. If you want to give the alias name, you can give the alias name like this, exception or whatever it is. Now instead of print expect, can I print my exception? Okay, now if you see this, now see 1 2 printed, 1 2 printed. After that, name location is not defined, the exception message printed. After that, finally, got executed or not. After that, 3 4 5. In this case, see, whenever exception raised, I know that exception is like what? Name is not defined. It's like a name error. Okay, exception class name is what? Name error. So in the expect block, I'm going to write like name error. I want to handle name error. Okay, I want to give like some alias name for that one. Now, if you print that particular alias name, you can see the exception message or not. Yes or no? If you want to handle the specific exception, and if you want to print the message, if you want to know some information about the exception, then you can go with this syntax. Now the same I'm going to write like this. Okay, you only tell. Now if I write like this, can anyone answer it? Now tell me, is my program terminated like normal or abnormal? Is my program terminated like normal or abnormal? Is my
Abnormal.
program second?
Abnormal.
Why abnormal? Why abnormal? Why abnormal? Correct. Abnormal is correct. Okay. Why? Because very simple. 1 2. Okay. Print to 10 by 0. Whenever the exception raised, what is my exception class? Come on. Division by 0. The exception class is what? 0 division error. Okay. Now you use it like only expect. Okay. If I use only expect, then that time it can handle any kind of exception. But now you specified like what? You handle only name error. You handle name error, but raised which error? You handle name error, but raised which error? 0 division error. Now it is going to looking for in the try block 0 division error raised. 0 division error you handled or not handled? 0 division error you handled or not handled? Not handled. Okay, you not handle the exception which raised. If not handled, then the time what happened? It is going to throw an error or not. See here, try block. Okay, after that final block executed. Okay, now the exception not handled. Which exception? 0 division error is not handled, so that it's terminated like what? Normal or abnormal? It's terminated like abnormal or not. Now what do you want me to do? Now what do you want me to do? Two options. One is like you can remove this one. One is like you can remove this one. Another one is like you can add what? You can add what? Come on. One is like you can remove this one. Another one is like what? You can add what? One
0
more
division error.
expect block or not? One more expect block. Can I add it? One more expect block. Expect. What is that?
0 division error.
0 division error or not? If you want to give some alias name, okay, as a exception, just you can print the exception or not. Print that exception. Yes or no? Print that exception. Now come here. Now if you come here, can I run it? Okay, how we can run? Py, okay, py 15.py. Now see this 1 2 printed, exception raised. Which exception raised? Which exception raised? Come on, which exception raised? 0 division error. Now it is looking for what? 0 division error. Did you handle or not? Here you not handled. Here you handled. So that, okay, 0 division error, the exception message printed. After that, finally, after that 3 4 5. If you don't want to handle the specific exception, okay, when you can go with this kind of, means whenever name error, I want to execute some statements, I want to handle the exception in one way. Whenever the 0 division error, okay, I want to handle that exception in different way. That means the exception to exception handling, the code is like different. Then the time name error related handling code you can write here. zero division error related handling code we can write here or not? Yes or no? When you can go with this approach. While handling, you have a specific solution is there for name error, for zero division error. That statements you have to write when that statements you have to execute whenever name error raised, whenever zero division error raised, so that those statements not common for all exceptions. That is only specific name error related, zero division error or not. In that case, it is recommended to handle the specific exceptions like this or not. Agreed with me, all? So my question is, okay, not only name error, not only zero division error, there has multiple errors are there, right? Multiple exceptions are there, right? So there has lot of exceptions are there. In that case, I don't want to handle, okay, specific one. Some more I want to handle, but other than these two, any exception raised, I want to handle with the same code only. Then the time how we can write? How we can write? You can write expect okay, expect block, expect block. Okay, now if you come here, whenever exception raised, division by zero, okay, that means division by zero, this one is going to execute it, division by zero. Okay, if you want, you can write. Okay, this one is what? Name error. This is specific to name error. And this one is for what? For all. This one is for what? For all. For all. Okay, now you can run it. Now in this case, which exception raised? Zero division error raised. Okay, now if I write like this, if I write like this, which exception? Name error. For example, if I write something like this, val equals to 10, val equals to 10, can I write val like this? Can I write val like this? Then what happened? Which error you can get it? Which error you can get it? Come on, which error you can get it? Here, val 10, you are calling 10 as like a function. Can I? As like a function, can I? Yes or no? Can I? No, right? Then the time which error you can get it? Integer object is not callable. For example, if I remove this one, what is my error message? Check it. What is my error message? This time type error. Do we have type error? The exception raised. The exception raised. Which error raised? Type error. Okay. Now looking for what? Expect block. Which type error? First one there? No. Second one there? No. Third one not there. So that my type error handled or not handled? Not handled. Whenever the exception raised, if you not handle, my program terminated like normal or abnormal? My program terminated like what? Abnormal or not? So except name error, except zero division error, any error if you get it, I want to handle with the same code. Then that time don't specify any specific exception class here. If you write like this only, it can handle any kind of exception or not. Any kind of exception. Now see, order important here. Whenever exception raised, if the exception is like name error, so that this block is going to execute. Exception is like zero division error. It is looking for top to bottom. Yes, there. This one is going to execute. If the exception raised, not name error, not zero division error. So this is not, this is not. And finally, all your exceptions handle with what? Handle with what? Expect block or not. This one is going to execute. Now, for example, okay, this is like valid or invalid. Now, if I write something like this, is it like valid or invalid? Syntactically, it's valid or invalid? Syntactically, it's valid or invalid? Now, it's a syntax error. Why? Because this one we can say like a default, okay, default one. Okay, default is nothing but it can handle any kind of exception. If you handle all the exceptions here only, what is the use of writing this specific? That the reason it's a syntax error or not. So the default expect block always should be lost statement or not, should be in the lost. Otherwise you can get the which syntax error, you can get it, you can get the syntax error. Understood? So try with multi expect blocks, valid syntax or not? Multiple expect blocks, valid or invalid? Yes, valid. Whenever you use multiple expect blocks, default expect block should be always lost, otherwise you can get the syntax error. Okay, it is recommended or not recommended? If you have multiple expect blocks, it is always recommended to put the default. Why? Because if you miss some exception handling, that particular one handle with what? Default one or not. Agreed? All are okay? Okay, okay then. Now tomorrow we'll see this name error. What is this name error? What is this zero division error? What is the type of this one? Can we create our own exceptions? All these things we'll see in the next session. Okay now? Okay then. Thank you guys. Thanks for joining.